More often than not, if you have been trying to solve your customer experience challenges because you know that it's going to not only improve customer retention, it's going to attract new customers, and most importantly, it's going to set you apart in the marketplace. You've likely had a conversation with a consultant whose biggest advice is let's change everything at one time, which is completely irrational and not going to happen. And if that's been the case, you may be thinking to yourself, like, my staff is already overworked. They already have so many things going on. We don't even have time to catch our breath. How are we going to change what we're doing, even though we know we need to change it? I don't see the capability or the scope here for us to do that. And yet most consultants are going to come in and say, okay, well, you just need to get everybody on board and you need to train them all to do, this exact thing. And you need to personalize every single interaction. And let's just kick this thing off and change everything all at once. Well, in the meantime, your staff is like, yeah, no, like I really actually just want to eat lunch. And right now that's my priority because I don't even get a lunch break. So if that's you and that's been your experience, and stay tuned to the video because I have a sure proof 3-step plan to get things rolling in the right direction so that you have a long-term plan to improve customer experience and become the luxury brand of your industry. Because luxury brands don't just appear one day. It's not just something that you decide, oh, I'm going to do that. And then you plug in a power cord and all of a sudden you're a luxury brand. It doesn't work that way. Your business has been operating a certain way all of this time. And so it's going to take time to challenge the things that you're doing and to implement changes in a slowly, methodical, and also effective way. So we're going to dive into the process for that in just a second. But the first question you really have to ask yourself as an organization and get leadership buy off around is what does it actually mean for us to improve customer experience? What does it mean for our customers? And which components of that experience are actually doable from where we are right now? Instead of having a consultant come in and just assume that you have an endless budget, endless head count, and endless time to implement a brand new strategy across your organization. Instead, let's just look at it from one step at a time and what's going to make the most meaningful impact right now if we change that. That's how this simple 3-step system goes into effect, and it helps you take control of what's happening now and work on that one tiny piece of your customer experience so that you can test it, see if the changes you're making are making a difference and actually producing results. And if they do, then you can implement it again. And so let's walk through what that process looks like and how you determine where to start. The first part of this is to actually determine where in your workflow of working with customers would benefit from changing and would have the most effect if you changed it up. So perhaps that is like a lot of times I'll work with organizations where they have either automated their phone calls or they don't have enough operators to answer phone calls. And so that initial phone call with a new patient or even existing patients is a friction point. And so they might look at changing that one component of their process and optimizing it so that it becomes a luxury feel for their potential customers and their customers. And so we're just going to use that one. And I wouldn't even do potential and current customers if they don't go through the same process. Stick to one process, one workflow, because if it works and you optimize it in one place, you just rinse and repeat it for the other places that customers are touched in that same way. So we're going to pick that one workflow and we're going to determine what we're going to change, how we're going to measure it, and see what the visible results are before we rinse and repeat it across other processes within the organization. So how do you pick that workflow? How do you know which one is the most important? The first component to look at when you're determining which workflow you want to improve is visibility. And the reason that you want to look at visibility is because the more visible a process is when you change it, the more likely people are going to notice. It just makes sense. So whether that's clients and potential patients or current patients, whether that's your team, whether that's upper level management. When the process is changed and the impact is positive, and the more people that see it, the more likely you're going to get buy-in to change other processes, which is really the point of all of this. So some really good processes to look at for optimizing are onboarding processes, new patient processes, perhaps like customer upgrade processes, things like that. So where you're seeing that you're losing a lot of customers or potential customers or patients along the way, or a lot of frustration for people that are coming through the door that are new to your practice or your business. Look at a process. It's like, okay, when you have a new client coming in or a potential new patient, what does that onboarding look like for them? Is it messy? Is it complicated? Is it causing them to have to repeat information, repeat things that they've already said? And is it at what point no longer a viable high-end experience for them? And if the answer is like step one, when they pick up the phone to call our office, then you should start there, because you're not going to be able to expand on a high-end luxury experience if the person answering the phone is turning them off to your brand and your business right at the get-go. And the same goes for online reputation. Like if you have an online experience for your customers that makes it hard to find you, hard to book appointments, hard to see what your reputation is, or you have poor reputation online, what are the odds that they're going to come in and become a client or patient, or share who you are with other people? Pretty slim. So you probably want to look at one of those to optimize first. And then the other component that you want to look at is the variability of that process, meaning, is the process the same for everybody that comes in? Do you have different processes for different people, or do you have different processes depending on how busy someone is? So what is the complexity of the process that you want to try and revamp? And how often is it consistent? Because if it's not consistent, then that might be an indicator of somewhere you want to start. And that would be by creating consistency for everybody that comes in the door. And oftentimes that can be dependent on which team member has, the bandwidth to manage people when they're coming in the door, how many people are coming in the door at one time, or if you're, for example, if you're an operator on a phone line and you're the only one working because somebody called out sick, like whatever that process is, it needs to be consistent before you can ever optimize it and improve it. So those are the two factors that you want to look at when you're looking at a process to choose. And you only want to pick one. Like only pick one. So if it's phone calls, it's phone calls. That's what we're going to work on, number one. If it's onboarding, then that's what we work on. That's it. Just like the onboarding of a new client for whatever product. And so when you're looking at it, it simplifies it down, even though it looks more complex, because once you can tackle a process and you can see how you do it effectively and can actually show results, it's much easier to implement it across the board and not do it at a large scale upheaval that's going to cause everybody in your organization to want to run Harry Carey through the halls and quit and never come back. So after we've identified those moments or that process that we want to improve and start to build that luxury feel for our brand, we then need to identify within that process 3 specific areas that affect our patients and clients. And this is where you start to get into the nitty-gritty of that process and start to look at it from a different perspective. The first thing you want to look at is that initial point when you have a new patient or a new client coming to you and they're feeling really vulnerable. They're feeling like they have this big problem. They don't know if it can be solved, or they might have a health condition that they don't know if you're going to be able to help them cure it or fix it. And they're feeling like they really have to have a lot of trust to come to you with this information. And so what that can look like is, we'll use the medical practice as an example. A new patient is coming to you and they've just booked their first appointment with the doctor and they've gone through the phone call and they're feeling a little hesitant because they don't know this doctor, they don't know anything about, the what to expect going forward. Like, are they going to need surgery, or that there's a lot of uncertainty there, which is why they feel vulnerable. So anything you can look at in the way that you process people through your system that eliminates that vulnerability is going to make them feel at ease and also make them feel like, wow, I'm really being taken care of here. So when you're looking at that initial interaction with them and making it as comfortable as you can. So if you have a professional services business, let's say you're in IT, for example, and you have a phone call with somebody who's not happy with their IT company at all. They either don't respond well or quickly, or they don't respond at all. Or a lot of times what I hear from people that outsource IT and different services like that is that they only hear from them when there's a problem. And so often people are very frustrated because they don't know what's going on. They're worried that their data isn't safe. They're worried that if their computer goes down, it might be weeks before they get it back. There's a million different things. So anything you can do within your process for that very first interaction that says, hey, this is how we work with people. And just to outline the process of, we make sure that you are taken care of 24 hours a day. There's always somebody on the team that can answer questions if you were to have an emergency like a fire or theft or something like that. We consistently have communication, whether if it's through our chat bot or email or phone or whatever it is you do, but just laying that out there right away so that they know that the things that they're worried about happening that are happening now to them are going to be eliminated, even if they don't know the whole entire way you're going to do that. If you can set the stage for you're going to be taken care of in a way that you've never been taken care of before, you are much more likely to start to build that luxury feel for your brand. Then the second moment of that process that you really want to take into consideration is when really the rubber meets the road. So you've promised them something with that initial phone call, whether it's like, we are going to get you in to see the doctor really efficiently and quickly, and this is what you can expect at that appointment. Or it is, we have an onboarding call with our clients, and this is what it looks like when we go through that onboarding process and we make sure we answer all your questions, et cetera, et cetera. But what I mean by this is when the rubber meets the road is that you've made a promise to them in that initial moment of this process. And then when the time comes for you to fulfill on that promise, you have to look at, are you actually fulfilling on the promise? So for example, if you're promising them an efficient visit to the doctor at that initial appointment, are you making them fill out additional paperwork? Are they having to wait 45 minutes because the doctor's running behind? Are you communicating if there's something that's out of the office's control, like the doctor got stuck in surgery and so he's running behind? Did you communicate that to them before they got there? Because if you didn't, then you've already gone back on your word and you're not living up to what you promised within your luxury and brand, your high-end brand experience. Everybody can say they're high-end and they want to offer a luxury experience. But at the end of the day, if your words don't and your actions don't align, you're not delivering something you promised. And people know it and they realize it, and it will either make or break that relationship in an instant. So identifying that second moment, the moment where people can fall off and things can shift and change just that quick, is going to help you know where to focus in your process for improvement and to actually deliver what you're promising. And then the third moment of that interaction or that process is ultimately how they feel about you and your organization and what they would tell other people. What are they going to tell their best friend about their visit to the doctor on the way home, on the phone call they make on the way home, or a family member? Are they going to say, hey, what's so great? I got in right away. I didn't have to answer any questions. The doctor, he knew what was going on with me. He knew all the right things to ask. They got me scheduled for whatever, let's say it's surgery. They got me scheduled for surgery in 2 weeks. I'm a little worried about that, but they said that there isn't going to be a problem. Like if we have anything that comes up, that is unexpected, they have resources that they can direct me to. And so I feel really confident about this decision. And I would probably tell other people about them. Or was it, oh my God, I had to sit there and wait forever. I used half my phone battery because I was just trying to find something to do. And I kept having to text work and let them know I was going to be late. And I had to fill out the paperwork 5 times. And the doctor had no idea what was going on with me. And so then I had to repeat everything to him. What is the likelihood that they're going to share your office or what you or your service with somebody else? Probably slim to none. And that if we're looking at the example of the IT company, and you've made these promises of how you treat people, but then at the end of the day, they've signed the contract, they're ready to move forward, and then they get this generic onboarding email with a PDF attached, and then they don't hear from you for 2 weeks. So until you're actually there to help them complete the changeover from their previous IT company, they're going to be like, what's going on? Like it just leaves so much uncertainty for them that they're starting to doubt their decision. They're like, oh man, this is going to be just like the other company. And I thought they were going to be different. Or does it look and feel different? And how are you going to improve it? So those are the 3 moments that you want to take a look at within that initial process. And you can see that each process is going to have to go through this same criteria. So once you go through it with one of your processes, it makes it easier for you to identify those moments within additional processes. So let's use some examples of how this was implemented. So this organization typically for their onboarding process, let's going to say that's the one they decided to fix, currently look like this. They had 20 people on their team. They would bring on organizations and they really didn't have a process in place for how to onboard them. They just had a generic email that went out sometimes, didn't really go out all the time. And then sometimes the onboarding or the new clients would be shifted between techs. And so they would be trying to email back and forth whatever information. And the client was just kind of shuffled around between people. They felt like they didn't know who they were supposed to be talking to. And once the contract was signed, they kind of felt stuck. And it just was not going well for either the organization because it felt very chaotic and nobody knew what they were supposed to be doing or how to take care of these people. And then for the client, they were feeling like, oh, what did I just sign up for? And so that's the precursor situation. And that's the process they decided to improve, was like client onboarding had to be fixed because this is where they were losing people. This is where people were leaving poor reviews about their service. And it's where their referrals were drying up because people would send them people, say they're so great. And then they'd have this experience and they're like, yeah, they're not that. They're not all that in a bag of chips for sure. And so they decided to choose that process. So these were their 3 moments that they fixed. The first was when they signed the contract, they planned to eliminate the silence, meaning they wanted to start to build that relationship with that client immediately. They didn't want to have to wait. They didn't want them feeling like they were being shuffled around, that there was a lack of communication, and that they had no idea what was supposed to happen next. They wanted to eliminate and improve that first communication so much that the people were like, whoa, I had no idea. I am so glad I did this. And so that was the first moment that they decided to change. So I kind of just told you what the initial way that it was handled. Like a client would sign the contract and they were just shifted off to whoever, and they might be onboarded, might not, just depended on who had time that day. And so it felt very much like the client was brushed off. So how do they improve it? What does it look like now? What does a new process look like? Well, within 90 minutes of their signed contract, they get a personalized video from their new account manager. In the video, it quickly describes the problems they've been having with their other IT company, the next action step that they need from them, which is, in this case, they needed them to give them the information for their current provider so that they could reach out as an organization on behalf of the client and start the transition. And then the last component of that video talked about the onboarding call, which will answer all of their questions, make sure that they are moving in the right direction and that there weren't additional needs that weren't discussed previously, or that if something had shifted within the organization, and just make sure that everybody's on the same page. So within 90 minutes, they get that video and it's personalized from their account manager. Now, if you're already freaking out, like, we can't make personalized videos, that takes way too much time, stick with me. I'm going to talk to you a little bit later in the video about how to make that happen quickly, easily, and also make it so that it is systematized automatically and you don't have to panic about how this comes out with your team having to do extra work. And then again, within that 90 minutes to 2 hours, they have a calendar invite for the onboarding call, and then they have a questionnaire that they send the new client that has 47 questions on it that they need to have answered in order to make sure that all of their IT information is documented somewhere, so that if they have any questions later as they start to implement the changeover, they don't have to keep bothering the customer. And so it took them some time to create that questionnaire, and it's all automated so that once it's in the system, everybody in the organization has access to it. The client has a copy and everybody is kept in the loop. So that's step one of the process that they fixed. So that first moment where the client is starting to be onboarded, they fixed that and moved into the second moment. So that's what they fixed in that first moment. And so you might be wondering, like, okay, so that sounds great. Did it work? It absolutely worked. The clients felt like they had momentum immediately, like they were moving forward with a company that they could trust. They knew what they had to do. They knew what was coming, that they were going to have this great onboarding call. And they knew that this company meant business because they had a 47 question intake that they needed from their new client in order to make this process really smooth. And so when they had the opportunity to, be asked about it later, they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that you needed this much information. It was so like fly by the seat of your pants with our previous company. It was so nice that you guys thought through all of this, that you actually sat down and you wrote it all out and you created this document that we could go and check items off from. And it just made it so much easier for us. And what did it cost them? What was the investment for the company? Well, it was that 90-second video that really paved the way for creating a unique experience for people. And it took them such a little amount of time to do this because the video was pre-recorded. All they did was switch out the introduction so it was specific to the client. They had an automatic appointment booking that happened with a link that went out in the email so they could book their appointment, and the email was automated. So it cost them setup time to do this, but then when it came to having this go out to every new client once they signed their contract, it was a no-brainer. It just went out and it did its thing. And so it made it so easy for them to look like they were giving their all without spending hours and hours and hours doing this for every new client. Exponentially grew their business, as a side note. So then they looked at moment number 2. And the second moment in this process for them was that kickoff call. And so they were meeting with their clients, but it was very sporadic. It might not always be with the same team member. There was a lot of changeover. It was very discombobulated. They'd often asked for information, but didn't get all the information. So then they had to go back and forth. And the client was just like, what the heck? Like, this place is a mess. And they were wondering, do they even know what they're doing? And so when you are trusting something like IT to an organization, you're like, they better know what the hell they're doing, because if they don't, I'm not trusting them with my tech, because we all know what it looks like if tech goes down. So how did they change it? You might be wondering. Well, the process to change this over was actually pretty simple. They had all kinds of notes, including that questionnaire that they had the client fill out ahead of time, put into their CRM. It's all tracked in there. The questionnaire is in there, and it's auto-filled all the information that it needed to be, so the account manager could go in right away and refresh what was going on with this customer, make sure that there wasn't something missing, and notice any comments or questions that were added to the questionnaire that needed to be answered on this call. And so that account manager was so prepared for the meeting that when he went in, he knew their business inside and out. And then the other thing that that client manager did was to open the conversation with the question, has anything changed since we completed this initial paperwork? Because it might be up to 2 weeks before they have that conversation, or sometimes longer, depending on the client's availability. And so by opening with that question, they are more easily apt to be able to address concerns or changes or anything that was unexpected. And then they can document that as well into the CRM so that if for some reason that account manager is on vacation or they're out sick, somebody can step in and know exactly what's going on. So that CRM made their life so much easier. And it made it so that they really looked like they had their act together in front of the customer. In the meantime, the customer feels heard. They feel like somebody's actually paying attention to their business. They feel assured in their decision, and they feel confident in going forward with the transition to this new company. So at the end of the day, they have already started to build the trust with this company, and they haven't even started implementation yet. So when they get to the third moment of this process, they've already started to build momentum towards having a overly satisfied customer and starting to really initiate and implement that brand, that high-end brand experience. What did it cost the company to do this? Well, it cost them 15 minutes for the account manager to go in and review and create, questions that they might have had about the information in there and get familiar with the new client. And then they felt prepared for that call. And then it might have taken them another 5 to 15 minutes to document anything that changed for that client or any other additional information that they gathered on that call. So maybe half an hour, but probably closer to 20 minutes because everything was already in there. So they just had to go in and review it. They had to make sure that nothing was missing. And then any comments or questions or concerns from the client, they put right into the CRM because then whether they need it as a memory refresher or somebody needs to step in for them, the information is there. So it really didn't cost them anything except for a little bit of time before and after the call. And it made a huge difference to their clients. So then we look at the third moment of this process. And what it used to look like is that they would just start implementation. They wouldn't ask questions. They didn't know what was going on. If they ran into a problem or a hiccup, then they might reach out. And the client was just thinking, okay, well, they haven't reached out, so they must not need anything from us. No news is good news. In the meantime, like things could be completely haywire. They don't have the information they need. And the first interaction that they actually have with the organization is when something goes wrong. And nobody wants to have that be your first interaction with a customer because then they're mad. Why would you want that to be your first interaction? Versus having that kickoff call has laid the groundwork in moment two so that when the implementation actually starts and you start rolling it out, it's going very smoothly. And if you do run into a challenge or something that was unforeseen, you already have rapport built with that customer, so you can reach out and say, hey, Phil, we're doing your implementation. We got to this point, and I'm not seeing anywhere in the survey you filled out or in the conversation that we had that this person that works remote needs to have whatever it is for their IT needs. Did that happen to get missed on some of the paperwork? Did we miss it? Like, we just need some advisement here on how to proceed with this. And chances are pretty high that the client's going to be like, oh, we totally forgot about Phil over here, or, Susie, who works from home. She used to work for us, and then she had, this whole story, whatever it is. And the client is going to then feel like they should have provided that instead of vice versa. And so rather than having oh, by the way, everything is screwed up and this is why, because we didn't get all the information we needed from you. And so now we have to come back with this giant problem. And by the way, your IT is going to be out for 3 days because we weren't prepared. That's a very different conversation. And so when you are implementing, a major transition like IT, having a process within the process that communicates with the client so they know what's happening along the way is even more emphasis on how you're taking care of them and are going to continue to take care of them. So for example, like maybe day 3, they get a personalized message that says, hey, this is what we've so far been able to tackle and where we are in the process. And this is the expectation of when we think things will be completed. Maybe a weekend and you're close to the end of the implementation, they get another personalized video that says, hey, we are about 10% out from completing your process. We have sent you an email about a few items that we need to have tested on your end, or questions that we might need to have answered, or everything is running smoothly and we don't need any input from you. We are going to let you know as soon as this is done. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to your account rep. Has a direct link to their phone number, their calendar, all of the things the ways that they can reach out to the tech. And then they feel like they're in the loop. They feel like they know when the project is going to be completed, and they feel like they know where things sit right now and if there's anything that they need to address. This does wonders for keeping the client in the process, involved in the process, but not so involved that they feel like they're managing it, but also that you have their back. And that ultimately is what it comes down to when you're trying to deliver a luxury experience is, does that client feel like you have their back in all perspectives so that they don't have to worry about this anymore because they hired you to do it and they know that you're going to do it and they trust in the way that you're going to deliver what you promised. So of course this worked because the client felt like they were listened to. They felt like they were kept in the loop. They felt like the red carpet was rolled out, and every step of the way they were handheld and taken care of. And the investment for this ultimately was one email, an additional email from the account manager, and then that 5-minute video to just give them an update. And they used a service like Loom, and they can just record it, send it out, and move on with their day. And they felt like it was super personalized and that they were just over the top with excitement for how this entire transition went with the new IT company. At the end of the day, those little touch points along that process made a huge difference. And just because they picked that one process and saw the results and they were so phenomenal, they decided to continue rolling that out both internally and with other processes where they touched customers, including marketing and sales. And so at the end of the day, the investment for what it took for them to change this up was so minimal. It took the video software, it took their CRM so they could capture the data, and it took some time to create that 47-point document that gathered all of the information they needed from their future clients. And that was just collaborating between all the techs one day over lunch. The business owner bought a pizza and they just documented everything that they could think of and then reviewed it until they felt like they had it all. But because they brought the mind power of all the techs in, everybody had a different perspective. And so it really worked well to make sure they had every piece of data that they needed. And it was rare that they were missing something, unless it was something that the client forgot to mention. And so that data document just changed the way they did business, even though it took a little bit of time to gather all the things that they needed to collect. So at the end of the day, it was well worth it to them to make that change for that one component, and it elevated their brand. Just changing that one process elevated their brand. So let's look at another example. Let's look at a medical office and see, what are the potential ways that they could up-level their customer experience. And I did another video on this, and I can link it above so that you can go watch that. And it was a pretty in-depth example of how you could up-level your process within a medical office. So I don't want to repeat that too much. So this is going to be a shorter example. The process they decided to modify was after the patient had already booked an appointment through seeing the doctor. And so it wasn't a matter of them coming and finding the office or necessarily the phone call, but it was everything that happened after they had already booked their appointment. And they felt like that was the biggest challenge for their office, and that they were losing people, or that their future patients were getting frustrated with processes. So the first moment that they took a look at was they called it the pre-appointment time frame. And before, it was the way that they handled this before was that they just got an automated text reminder. They might have got an email. They don't really know if they got delivered. And there was no information about what to expect. It was just like, show up for your appointment. You need to be here 15 minutes early. And there may be paperwork you need to fill out. And within the email, they got pretty much the same message with maybe a link to complete paperwork prior to getting to the office. Instead, what they got was a personalized video from the doctor they were going to be seeing, welcoming them to the practice, thanking them for choosing their practice to come and help them, and then specific instructions about what to expect. There is a link below this video. Please click it, fill out your paperwork. Once it's in your system, you're not going to be asked for it again. When you come in, you can expect to be seen within this amount of time. When you're back with the doctor, he's going to explain to you exactly what your options are and ask you specific questions about what's going on with you. And we are going to try to make the most effective use of your time with your hair, because we value you and we value your time. And below that, there would be a link to the paperwork. There would be any additional information that the office would need to collect, whether that's HIPAA or whatever it is they needed. And that went out to the patient within 15 minutes. I think it was within 15 minutes of them booking the payment or the appointment, because it was automated. And so the patient then had everything they needed to make sure that the office visit was effective and quick and got to the root of why they were there. And then along with that, there were reminders built in, so that if the patient did not fill out their paperwork, they got a couple of reminders before they came to get that done. Because it's easier to fill out paperwork at home than it is to try and do it in the office, because a lot of times you don't have all of the information you need. And so they wanted to give them a reminder to make sure that that got done ahead of time, because one of the problem areas was that people were coming and their paperwork had not been submitted. Now, that leads us to moment number 2, which was when they arrived in the office. And if they happened to be an older person who struggled with technology and they couldn't fill out that paperwork, previously they were just handed a clipboard and said, fill out the paperwork. And then somebody had to type it in, and it was making extra work. And they were just sitting in the waiting room, waiting for the doctor, hoping he was running on time. Usually he wasn't. Nobody communicated. It was kind of a mess. So instead of being, shuffled into a waiting room, the new experience was they were greeted by name. If they had paperwork or things that needed to be addressed, they were assisted with that so that it could be done quickly and efficiently. And they were reminded that it would all go into the same system so they wouldn't be asked again. They were offered a refreshment, whether that was coffee or water or soda or whatever, and sometimes a snack. And then they were updated about the doctor's schedule. The doctor's running 10 minutes behind. We apologize for that. He, had to spend a little bit longer with another patient, but we are going to get you in right away. So once we get your paperwork figured out, and we have everything we need, then we're going to get you in right away. And if you, for some reason, can't wait that 10 minutes, we can go ahead and reschedule you. And if not, then enjoy your refreshments. We'll be right with you. And what that did for the patient is it let them know what to expect. And it also gave them control. Like now they knew they had 10 minutes to go to the bathroom if they needed to, or look up their insurance information that they didn't add in there, or whatever it was. And it just offered a little bit of comfortability to them so that they didn't have to worry about being rushed, or even more like if they had something going on after the appointment, that they were going to have to be late. whether that was picking up a kid or maybe they had, a lunch appointment or they had to get back to work or whatever it was. They knew that they were going to be seen within 10 minutes because Susie, the receptionist, told them, we're only running 10 minutes behind, so the doctor's going to see you within 10 minutes. So that was the second moment, was when the patient got there and what their experience was in the waiting room. The third moment that they wanted to address in this scenario was what they refer to as the handoff. And that was once they had already met with the doctor and they knew what their next step in the process was, that they were handed off to someone to either make an appointment or collect any other data they needed, whatever it was. And so the previous process was, hey, head up to the front desk and she'll schedule your next appointment and make sure that all your billing stuff is up to date. The new process was that the doctor actually walked the patient up to the front desk, ensured that the scheduling employee knew exactly what happened with the patient and what type of follow-up appointment they would need, whether it was, a checkup for post-surgery or it was a surgical appointment, whatever it was. And an invitation from the doctor to the patient that if they needed any additional, information or had additional questions, that this was the phone number for the doctor and that they could leave those on his direct line and he would get back to them within, 24, 48 hours, whatever it was. And it gave them the opportunity to reach out to the doctor with any additional questions or concerns. And followed up by the doctor with, are there any other questions you thought of before you go that need to be answered? And what that did was it had that little bit of hand holding, that couple of minutes it took for that doctor to walk the patient to the front and ensure that patient that they were going to be taken care of no matter what, that there was someone always going to answer their questions. So you may be wondering, at this point, how do I implement this into my organization? How do I systematize what I want to change? And so the first thing you need to do is determine what process you're going to start to improve and why that process is important and who it will impact the most. And then the next thing you need to do is start to map out your 3 moments within that process and have them be the most significant processes to the client or patient, because it may be significant to your internal team, but at the end of the day, it's not going to grow your brand or the luxury feel of your brand if it only affects the internal team. And so looking at that process in the moments that most directly affect the people that you serve is going to be much more effective in growing all of the things that grow your business: referrals, lower no-show rates, Google reviews, customer satisfaction, all of those things. And so once you map those 3 areas out, then you need to kind of design what the ideal experience would look like for your clients. Like, what should it look like instead? How do we want to come across to our clients and patients that makes us look and feel different than everybody else? And how are we going to ensure that we're successful with the adoption of that process? So it becomes kind of the dream board for the process. And you may not get to, the full-on implementation of, everything you've ever wanted that process to look like in the first rendition, but that doesn't mean it's impossible to get there. So draft it, dream it, and do it. That's just came up with that for you. Draft it, dream it, do it. Within that process, you want to determine, what are those differentiation factors going to look like? So both the IT company and the doctor's office use video. Video is a great way to personalize interactions and make people feel special. and deliver information that most people aren't willing to go the extra mile to do that. They'd rather just send an email with a PDF and say, all right, I hope you read it, and not ever follow up or think through, what happens next. So think through those little components that could make a big difference, and write them all down, because then you and your team can look through it and go, that's doable, that's not, that we could do that maybe later down the line, that kind of stuff. So you're not implementing something that's so over the top and hard that nobody can get on board and nobody gets excited about it and nobody wants it to succeed, because you have to have buy-in from your team in order to make this successful. And it can't necessarily just be what's best for the business. It has to, in some way, illustrate to them that it's going to make their lives easier too. And this is how. And sometimes that's selling, like, we have to do the hard thing first so that we can get you your time, your, sanity back, for lack of a better term, so that they're interested in moving forward with the change as well. And then you need to identify, like, what is the trigger for that process, and how does it need to be modified. So whether it's like a brand new appointment is created for the office, what is the signal for what kicks off that process, and then that helps your team identify what they need to do, and when they need to do it. So, because if you're trying to tackle too many things at one time, it's just going to get frustrating for them, and it's going to get frustrating for the people that are trying to implement this new process. So then the next component of this is implementation. Like, what is going to be the few things that you're going to implement across the process? So whether that's a welcome email, it's the video, it's the, somebody's going to pick up snacks for the waiting room. It's, what does the check-in look like for the new client that signs their contract, or what does the check-in look like for a new patient? All of those things. And then you start to build those things out and automate what you can. Not everything is going to be able to be automated. A lot of things will be able to be automated and then personalized regardless. And so, for example, the doctor video was recorded once, and then the personalization happened on the back end. And luckily, we live in a world where technology and AI are at our fingertips. And so we can do a lot of things to personalize and amplify experience without adding more time to our day to do those things. So at the end of the day, then you want to measure what worked and what didn't work and what your results are, versus where they were. Because if you don't have measurement of the change, it's going to be really hard to get buy-in to do it again. And that comes down to the last part of this video, which is, how do you get economic buy-in from your higher ups? Like, you have this great idea and you want to change it, and you want to get upper management or upper level leaders to agree to let you change this up, so that you can improve not only the inner office dynamic, but the way that you're seen in the marketplace. And so the easy answer is, you don't sell the whole program, you sell a pilot, which means you go to them and you're like, hey, I want to try this for 90 days. This is the process that we've mapped out. It was me and 3 other people. These are the things that we want to try and improve. This is how we want to improve them, and this is how we're going to measure it. And when you have those, and of course, what is the investment to make that happen? So is it, less than $500 because all you're going to do is videos and a couple snacks? I don't know. Like, you're going to have to figure those numbers out for yourself. But at the end of the day, when you have all of those metrics and you've answered all of those questions, and you have an idea of what kind of improvement you're going to be able to provide by changing that process, chances are they're going to give you the opportunity to do that, just to see what happens. So one of the most important metrics that you're going to want to include is, tracking. You want to track, like, what was happening before, what's happening now, how much time it's saved, whether your Google reviews improved, whether customer referrals have increased, how many no-shows you have versus before and after, and like what's the employee morale and culture like, has that changed as well, things like that, so that you have metrics to show the higher ups when this works, that it did work and that you now want to try it in a different place, and improve the organization overall. So, all of that to say, if this has been valuable to you and you're thinking, wow, there's so many things we can improve, I have no idea where to start, I don't know what process to look at, there's no way I'm going to be able to identify those three moments on our own. Like, there's just too many moving parts and I am already overwhelmed. Well, the good news is that you can book a 30-minute free call with me and we can look at those things together. I have the link for that call below this video, and I'm happy to hop on a call with you and maybe a couple team members, and we can start to take a look at it and see, where are the things that would be the most beneficial to improve or change. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I appreciate you tuning in. And I'd like to know in the comments below from you, like what you are looking at changing. What's the number one process you think you might change in your organization? And where do you think you're going to get stuck along the way? In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up or a like, because YouTube likes that and so do I. And I appreciate you liking the video and for tuning in each week, and I'll see you next time. Take care, be well, stay safe.